ขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับคุณแอนโทนีครับ
Good morning, Thailand. How's everybody on a Saturday morning? Are you ready to hear about how dangerous digital transformation can be if you don't do it securely? So I think that's a very important topic and something that we don't pay attention to until it happens to us. I think given the news every day, we see lots of stories about data leaks, data exfiltration, companies who have lost their digital information in cyberspace. And it's costing organizations lots of money. And as we build smart cities and smart nations and we connect everything with the Internet of Things and operational technology and our lives are impacted more and more, we're at risk. We're increasing our attack surface, as we say. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today and so happy for all of you to be here on a Saturday morning to hear this very important topic, which is about cyber resilience. How do we operate through a cyber attack? First, we're going to talk a little bit about what is cyberspace, what does this mean to you, and what does it mean when we're digitally transitioning everything to operate and be dependent upon it. We're going to talk about the problem and specifically what you can do, how we can work together to address this very important issue, and then discuss this paradigm shift away from blocking the attacker to how do we absorb the attacks and go through them. And I hope to do this in such a way that, that leaves everyone with a feeling that you can make a difference in securing your part of cyberspace. So let me tell you a little bit about us and a little bit about our company first so you understand the context of the information I will give you. First, our background. We come from the U.S. Department of Defense and Intelligence community, so we have seen firsthand from a very, very governmental view from military and defense and intelligence what very sophisticated attackers can do when they're planning attacks in cyberspace, understanding the policy and technical aspects of how these attacks are put together. And we also come from the financial services sector. So we have offices in Singapore and also in Bangkok, happy to say that, and in Washington, D.C. And so very, very excited to be here and honored that Deepa has invited me to speak at the event on this topic. You can learn more about us at the website here. I also want to give a shout out to Precise, who is in the middle of the conference hall right there. I'll be there. They've sponsored me to be here today, so I really appreciate that. And if you want to ask me questions about cyber resilience and cybersecurity, come find me at Precise's booth, just right behind where we're at today. So I'm looking forward to engaging you to ask and answer any questions that you have. So to start, I'd like to just define what is cyberspace. You know, 33 years ago, in 1984, that seems like such a long time ago, William Gibson wrote a novel called Neuromancer, where he used the term cyberspace for the very first time. And in this novel, and it's a good read, by the way, I'm sure that it's translated into Thai, and it's something very good to read if you can get a copy still. But he talked about cyberspace being a consensual hallucination by being used and experienced by billions of users in every nation. That it's a graphic representation of data, that it's abstracted, and it's a human system. It's very complex, and it involves the mind. It's like city lights receding. Now, this is a piece of fiction, and this is 33 years ago, a visionary who wrote a great novel concept of cyberspace. But think about what it has evolved to today. And I would ask you, what do you think cyberspace is? Well, first, cyberspace, it's used by everyone. You can just look around the room here and see that everybody is integrated into cyber. Businesses and economies profit from it, and importantly, our critical information infrastructures, from hospitals to banks and finance to the power grid, all depends upon its operation. And as we transform to build smart cities and smart nations and connect everything, from your rice cooker to your refrigerator to your car will all be connected to this global grid. Think about what a tremendous vulnerability we're creating for ourselves at the same time. And at the same time, militaries have declared cyberspace a fifth domain of warfare alongside of air, land, sea, and space. We also have cyber as an element of warfare. And so you have hospitals and power grids and schools, and everything is happening. And at the same time, there's cyber wars being fought at the same time. Some of them, happen behind the scenes that we don't see. At the same time that militaries are operating in cyberspace, so are cyber criminals. Trend Micro wrote a report that was published within the last 2 weeks that just in the first half of 2017, the global cost of cyber attacks have been $4 billion US. Just let that sink in for a minute. That is a hefty price tag from a cyber criminal standpoint. They're taking advantage and exploiting our trust. And at the same time, they're exploiting the trust of our families and our children who use the internet. So the Internet Watch Foundation determined in 2016 that there were over 57,000 sites confirmed engaged in enabling child sexual abuse. This is an alarming thing. So cyberspace, this tremendous capability, it can be used for good and bad. And I think that that's something we all need to remember every day when we're stopping, thinking, and clicking on things, and what that is doing to our homes and the organizations that we work for. So cyberspace, as we consider digital transformation to embrace cyberspace, cyberspace is our greatest advantage. And at the same time, it's our greatest weakness, because we build our capabilities on this fragile information and communications technology underpinning. We're putting all of our hopes and all of our businesses and all of our capabilities and all of our children when we hand them iPads and we say, just go watch cartoons. Are we really sure what they're doing online? So think about this vital resource and how we secure it together. And that's really the topic that I'm going to transition to here, is what can we do together? And in my challenge in addressing this very diverse audience that is made up of everyone, I first wanted to start about what can you do as an individual to help secure your part of cyberspace. And it's just like, think of it as just like brushing your teeth in the morning. In the industry, we call it cyber hygiene. And this is making sure when you have your 3 computers, your cell phone, all of your portable devices, that you're patching them. Sometimes it's that simple. Just like getting dressed in the morning, it's making sure your operating systems are up to speed with the latest and greatest patches. You've enabled the security features that are already enabled in the system, because we trade security for convenience on a daily basis. Sometimes we want to download that movie from the internet. Oh, the firewall won't allow it, so we have to turn it off. Well, not only shouldn't you be doing that, but maybe, because it could have a virus, but maybe you should turn the firewall back on after you're done. So think about that, and also think about getting your own house in order with respect to cyber. And that's checking out, working with your internet service provider, such as TOT or CAT Telecom, and that's turning on your Wi-Fi passwords, changing the default passwords. It's that simple. And then enabling the firewall within your home router to protect your enclave. Don't give out your Wi-Fi password to everyone. You should have a guest mode where people are coming over. You think about your internal network and what you share to others. Because if someone comes over your house to visit and they ask you what your Wi-Fi password is, Well, most of the time you just give it to them, but you don't realize when you give them that Wi-Fi password, it stays in their phone, so somebody could steal it from their phone, or maybe later you don't want that person to have it, so they're going to come by, park outside, and easily access your photo files and things like that. So think a little bit more about how to protect your corner of cyberspace, and importantly, care what your family does online. Don't ask questions. Start early education at home, and this is a very important issue. There are lots of resources that you can use to do this and to learn more. For example, the Thai police, the DSI, and there's a Thai technical cyber suppression unit for cybercrime. I was out on their web page this week, and there are many resources that families can use, not only to report crimes, but also to learn and to educate yourselves and others about the dangers of cybersecurity. And of course, you can reach out to the Thai CERT, which is an organization for you to report incidents to and issues when you find child predators online. There are places to do this. And also, industry. Industry is a great resource to do this. So if you want to learn more about this, again, I'll be in Precise's booth after the talk, and I can go into greater detail about some of the options available for you. Importantly, so now we've covered what would you do as an individual. I would like to talk to the business leaders in the audience and those watching online. And many times we're called in to talk to boards of directors after some big mortal cyber event has happened and the organization has lost millions of dollars, and now we finally have to do something about it. But don't wait for that to happen to you to try to address this challenge, because it's always easy to turn your back and, like an ostrich, put your head in the sand until the problem happens. But be proactive, otherwise you won't be part of that digital transformation. You'll be a roadblock to achieve it. So the first thing leaders can do as a business leader is recognize that cybersecurity is not just an information technology problem. Cyber and digital transformation is the lifeblood of your business in the 21st century. It enables your business functions to operate, and without it, you couldn't be as nimble and effective to create greater profitability. So it's pretty important, and it's something to invest in, and it's a boardroom and board level discussion. It should be on the agenda at every meeting. Also recognize that advanced attackers, when they want to target you, they just don't come knocking at your company's door. They target you at home, and they target your families. Because in most of the times, an executive of a company will take their company laptop and they'll come home and they'll plug it into their home network. Or and that's the same network that their children might use. So if a very advanced attacker wants to, we call it whaling in the cyber business, because there's fishing to catch all the little fish, but to catch the playa or the big whale, you want to go after the executive. And there's lots of stories about millions and millions of dollars being lost from this tactic, where you just target the leader, tie them up and occupy them, and convince their office that they need money to continue to operate, and they'll just send it if they believe it comes from their email account, and they get a couple sources of verification. But all that knowledge can be gained from an executive's laptop or their email store. And the final thing is, don't wait, as I mentioned, to be hacked to invest in at least 10 to 20% of your budget, not just your IT budget, your overall budget. These are just industry norms. But most organizations, unfortunately, underinvest in cybersecurity, and they wait until the catastrophic attack happens to realize that this is an area to spend in. So it's important. Maybe perhaps have a third-party organization come in and do an independent analysis, and then address the problem as you need to do. So let's talk about what you can do as a technology expert, because I see lots of technology experts in the room. And now the next portion of this presentation is really focused at the technology experts, because the technology industry is responsible for creating this wonderful cyber ecosystem that we're in, and perhaps we need to look at it from a different way, in a different framework. I look at it from this cyber attack framework, from considering how an adversary gets in the network, how do they stay inside of the network, and how do they act? And then importantly, how do they impact our business operations? So what I see is that organizations are too focused on blocking the adversary from getting in. It's important to understand what do they do once they get inside the network, so to have multiple layers of security defense. So to examine, once they're past the front door, the hacker has come in, and their next job is to spread themselves as wide as possible in the organization. So it's important to censor your network in such a way that you understand what are they after and what is their motivation. The adversary is then free to roam about the internal network and begin to start to plan their attack to impact the network. So really the needed focus is to reduce an adversary's impact to your business, to the business essential functions or the mission of the organization. This is where shifting your strategy away from blocking to one of resilience is important, and this is what we're going to talk about next. And cyber resilience is really focusing, because you can't afford to protect everything. It's about focusing on those critical information systems and the critical functions to continue your business operations, and that's not always clear. Should I spend enough to protect my business and organization? Well, how much is enough? What are your most essential capabilities? It's about focusing on priority information and communications so you can continue, and it's about having a plan B, because you can't always go with status quo and normal, because normal stops to happen when you're under cyber attack. Cyber resilience is much more than about diverse networks, because many times resilience is confused in the business continuity world with availability. So if I keep the network up, if I have diverse networks and redundant pathways and 5 nines where my system is up 99.99999% of the time, well, that's important from a business continuity standpoint. But remember, a cyber adversary wants your network to be up and running, because they want to take your data. They want to manipulate your data. Think about data manipulation and data integrity. That's something that doesn't hit the news very often. We know, to expect that an attacker might steal personal data or want to steal money from the organization. But what if their motivations are much different? Maybe what if you're the military or you're the police, and the hackers want to go in and actually manipulate and change the records so that arrest warrant never happened? Or perhaps the military's launch orders and target destination is changed, so they're blowing themselves up. I mean, this is really advanced warfare in cyber. So these are things, if you've got a very large company doing business and your information is such a vital asset, you need to also consider the integrity of your data, not just that you've got your systems up and running all the time. And cyber resilience is about building survivable capabilities that are flexible, that can adapt, and can maintain trustworthiness through adversity across the elements from people, the physical assets, and the information domain. And it's not easy to do this. We're going to talk about some methods and why this is difficult. And I put together a simple animation to describe where the focus is today, where is the needed focus, and why is this such a difficult problem. And to start, that our digital economy is dependent on a shared information infrastructure that is owned by the public sector and the private sector. It is not a very simple thing to draw this connectivity throughout this multi-dimensional network because networks are not one dimension. There are enterprise services, there are least known networks, there's power and telecommunication networks that all depend on this critical infrastructure. And today, as I mentioned before, the thought is that we will just make the circuits diverse and have, from a telecom perspective, resilience means that our networks are always operational. Well, again, attackers want them to be operational. So the needed focus is in this middle layer. Think of it kind of like the cloud. And this is where it's important to map and link the cyber assets that are important to your business function to the underlying critical infrastructures that they support, because that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to invest into battle hardening the most important assets for your mission. It's to enhance integrity. So to know when your data went bad and when do you go back and what decisions could you have made on bad data. So having a system that understands the confidence based upon the threat environment that it's operating in, based upon the very complex knowledge and traceback if an attacker has gotten in. Because most of the times an organization will have a cyber event, patch the hole, and then move on as business normal. Well, maybe we should look at the data. Was something not just stolen, but was it manipulated? So again, focusing on data integrity is an under-focused area and very important. The other thing is having mission-focused cyber operations or security operations. One of the things we do when we have an engagement and we go into a company, we're often showed their network operations center, the lifeblood, if you could imagine, of an organization where they're monitoring all the routers and all the switches and the network, and if you're a bank, maybe the operation of the ATM machines. And then we ask, can we see the security operations center? And sometimes the security operations center is in a completely different area or maybe even another country or outsourced to a third party, which is okay. But the point is, and the point that I try to make to executives who make these decisions is that security operations and network operations should be done together, because it's all about keeping your business running and secure and having integrity. So it's important not to have these separate disparate functions. It's important to operate them from a mission focus, so you can make those trade-off decisions between security, usability, and operations. And it's very important at the end of the day not to forget to do training and equipping key critical infrastructure and key resources. So we're training in a degraded environment. We know what to do when the hackers have taken out operations or manipulated the data. We have to work together through cyber exercises, and I'm going to talk about that a little later, but we cannot ignore the human aspect of training. So just to recap, the foundation for cyber resilience is having robust networks, assured information communication technology services, and trusted information. And it has to be done in close coordination between the public sector and the private sector. Governments can't do it alone, and the private sector can't do it alone. So it has to be a joint partnership, so to speak, to address cyber resilience. To recap the focus of where we are at when we're talking about the technology leaders addressing this problem, we are now talking about the upper end of the threat scale. The lower end of the threat scale for you securing your environment at home, or you securing your environment at your school or in your certain businesses, you really have to consider about the basic hygiene and the critical information and really information assurance and security that I've been talking about. But when we talk about next generation adversaries that are targeting critical infrastructure, targeting key government systems, targeting banks, it's really about how they're disrupting and stealing the information, and really when it escalates to cyber warfare. This is where these resilient strategies come into play and how you have to be more agile to defeat them. By the way, I am going to make these slides available after the presentation, and I'll have my email later. And if you send me an email, I will provide you a link that you can view the material. And I'll be very happy to answer questions with you about this afterwards. So really, let's talk from a resilience engineering standpoint, really diving deeper for the technical expert. What can you do to design, to apply a resilience engineering system design to design your system so it can operate through a cyber attack? Essentially, you want to reduce the risks of degraded or failed missions by analyzing the adversary tactics and designing countermeasures at every step, because the bad guys will always get into the most protected networks. Your mission is to keep your business functions going despite being under cyber attack, and you have to architect for resilience, and you even have to employ advanced capabilities like deception, meaning when an adversary attacks you and takes out your system, most organizations will just restore from backup. Well, that just basically means you patch the hole and you put the same thing up that the adversary attacked before. So now they know how to attack it. So what's stopping them from doing it again? So one of the things you should think about is how do you employ deception to fool or to trick the adversary? Perhaps you create a portion of your network as what we call in the industry a honeypot or a trap, where you put fake data out there and they're basically playing over here while you've reconstituted to a completely new operating system and in a way that they will not understand. So these are the types of tactics of resilience engineering principles that you should employ when designing networks to be survivable. And the good news is there are tried methodologies to approach this. The first one is to do what I call is to do a crown jewel analysis. So if you're an engineer at a large organization that's responsible for keeping your network up and running and secure, you want to first analyze what are the critical components and what are the dependent subsystems. Then you apply design principles that we will cover briefly in resilience engineering, such as segmentation. Microsegmentation essentially is like building flood compartments. If you think of the way a ship is built, if one part fills with water, it's designed so it seals itself off and the other parts can stay afloat. Well, it's very similar when you're thinking about network engineering. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You might micro-segment your network so you can shunt network traffic away from attackers and isolate them within a certain part of the network. And again, there are guidelines that I will provide you links to that you can study about these engineering and design principles. Creating defendable zones in your network and mapping the core network to the dependent functions. Now, when I talk about, because I use a lot of acronyms when I was in the government, so I'll try to spell some of these out. When I talk about perform an exposure analysis or a CI review, what I mean by that is a counterintelligence assessment. And what this means is that you're looking at your network as if you were an adversary, and you're understanding how you look to an adversary's eyes. And not just the network, but the whole organization. So what I find when we do this for companies is companies share way too much data publicly about themselves. A good place we look is on job announcements. So if we were to look at a bank, or maybe, I'll pick online because they're over here, maybe we would go and look at their human resources department and their job announcements that they put out there for their system administrators. And in the system administrator tag, you would see, well, they list the operating systems that they use, or maybe some challenges that they're having and that they need to hire someone. Well, for a bad guy, that's perfect information, because then you could use that to craft your attacks or use it for phishing emails to get in to show knowledge of the organization. So it's important to take a counterintelligence view of how your organization looks like from the outside. And even for your family, so I'll make this down to the basic level, think about what you post on Facebook. Think about what you post publicly on Facebook, and when you mention your children and your schedule and your names and where you go, these are all important things that you can do. Both LinkedIn, Facebook, a lot of the social media apps have tools now where you can look at your own profile and see what it looks like to the public. You want to take that observation from time to time so you can adjust your online behavior and not give all your information away. Like people who go on vacation or holiday and put that stuff on public Facebook, well, a criminal can just see that you're not at home and then come in and, you know, steal all of your stuff. And would you want to advertise that? You know, you got to think twice before you do some of these things. And importantly, it's important to test your information and communications technology so it works under fire and deflects attacks. Now, I have worked extensively in the United States government with a think tank called MITRE, who has done a great public service for the world by developing a cyber resilience engineering framework that you can download for free and start to look at it. And there's a link down here at the bottom. Again, I'll tell you where it is if you send me an email. And it's very good in that it looks at, it's a over 300-page document, so it's very, very detailed from an engineering and architecture guideline, and it teaches about how to design your system in that it can have resilience principles in effect. And it talks about goals, objectives, and practices, which I will cover very briefly here, so you kind of can see the point that I'm trying to make. So the resilience goals are about anticipating the attack, withstanding the attack, recovering from the attack, and evolving to a trusted state. The objectives are to continue operations, to constrain the adversary, to transform yourself, and to re-architect. So as you can see, this has become very much like cyber jiu-jitsu, right? So you take the adversary's attack and you have to use a very spiral way to quickly evolve your system to operate. And this can only be done if it's engineered in the beginning this way. Again, just to recap, the engineering goals for MITRE's framework are to anticipate, withstand, recover, and evolve. And again, this is something that you can download for free from the internet, and I'd be more than happy to help you understand it better. Okay, so now we're going to talk from the vulnerable network underpinnings that we've been discussing to the information, because it's all about the information. We cannot forget that that's, at the end of the day, the golden resource that we're trying to protect. And it comes down to how do we reconstitute trust. And so when an incident happens, when that digital hand grenade goes off in the server room and you're scratching your head, we have to think, when we reconstitute our systems the way they were before and just restore from backup, are we just putting the pin back in? How do we restore in a way that deceives the adversary so they won't attack us in the future? And it's about investing in capabilities that give you visibility into your network. There are lots of the cybersecurity industry has gone bonkers to provide lots and lots and lots and lots of solutions for this problem. There are a couple good solutions out there. I'd be happy to talk to you based on my opinion, which ones are the right ones. And it often depends on your infrastructure and architecture. But knowing about yourself, knowing the adversary and how they're targeting you is important. And you can censor your network given the routers and switches and servers that you already have and put that data together to understand your adversary. And that's important to use cyber threat intelligence to be able to reconstitute trust. Understanding the adversary's motivation and why they're coming after you in the first place is key to doing that. To talk briefly about exercises now, we cannot wait for a cyber attack to happen to be the first time we're experiencing this. So every organization that has a fire drill that goes out and exercises what to do with the buildings on fire should do a cyber fire drill, right? A cyber exercise. And this cyber exercise shouldn't just involve the geeks and the IT people. This needs to involve everyone from the senior leaders of the organization, from the information technology professional, to the cyber person responsible for putting it all together. And this is so everybody knows how to work together. For example, corporate communications is a big issue. When a large company, especially a publicly traded company, perhaps on the SET or another stock exchange, is under cyber attack, what they say during that week that they're under cyber attack to the public can really affect their stock price. So having that planned, understanding the corporate communications that have to happen, and even one of the biggest areas I see underlooked in Southeast Asia so far since I've been here is insider threat. Everybody is very trusting of everyone, and you have to realize that the easiest way to attack your organization could be from within. So some people could actually send a person to become employed with your company for the sole purpose of attacking your company or manipulating your data or causing you to have some kind of cyber damage. So it's important to plan for this and to exercise your human resources policies and processes, and perhaps your physical security processes. Would you be able to trace back if this individual still has access to your company after they've been fired? Because I've been a part of many investigations where we find ex-employees or ex-executives still accessing company resources. This is something you want to plan for and test if you know how to shut it down and stop it. And in doing the training, it's important to train as a team. Right now, a lot of people train independently. They go to courses, they study online. But really, we're going to be working together throughout a cyber event. So having events, just like there are game-a-thons here, think about having hackathons where organizations understand how to work together and defend together at the same time and involve the leadership of the organization again. That's important. We have to figure out how we work together well under duress. So in getting into the last part of this presentation, I've talked so far about the cyber threats that we're faced, the fact that we're transforming into this digital environment to cyberspace, and that we're actually creating a huge attack surface for ourselves and perhaps setting us up for the biggest failure of our lives and of our society if we're not careful. Now, what can we do from a governmental perspective? And I'm saying this from all governments. What can all governments do to address this very important issue? And I've come up with a couple of key points from a strategic standpoint of how governments can ensure a cyber-resilient digital transformation. And the first is to contribute towards the fact that citizens can understand cybersecurity threats and consequences and have better situational awareness. Just like when there's a cyber storm, or just like when there's a weather storm or a cyclone heading towards Thailand, think about if there's a cyber storm headed towards. Can we predict that and inform the public? And the next is to innovate and to invest heavily in research and development with a strategic focus to, sorry, that's number 3. To innovate and to have the strategic focus to build entrepreneurs, because the old solutions that we've been trying won't be able to solve this problem. We've got to bring innovation, and I have been very impressed with what I've seen at Digital Big Bang 2017 to see this huge conference with lots of innovators in the room. So I'm very excited that there's the right environment in Thailand to have innovation and to spark that innovative spirit to solve this problem. And moving back one, it's to have that strong cybersecurity legal and policy foundation to make sure that when issues do happen and you catch the bad guy, that you can prosecute them. That's important, and everybody understands the law of the land when it comes to cyber. Next is to coordinate across the military and the critical infrastructure sectors to dynamically protect the country. And because everybody is building up cyber commands around the world, there are militaries with offensive capabilities, there are defensive capabilities. Realize, as I said in the very beginning of this presentation, that hospitals are operating on the same platform that wars are being fought. So when there's an attack launched in response to an attack that might have been received, the response you get back from your adversary might strike an unanticipated target because everybody's in the same battlefield, so to speak. And finally, or getting towards the end, cyber safety and education starts very early And it's important to address this issue at the earliest stage in childhood development to not just assume that your child is watching a cartoon with the iPad that you gave them, but perhaps to talk to them a little bit more about the dangers of operating online. Maintaining a high level of readiness to conduct coordinated incident response and working between the public and private sector. This is where censoring key components of the nation and having this reporting that everybody can tap into to understand, because attacks that happen in one sector can quickly spread to another sector. So in conclusion, I'd like to end with a picture of one of my favorite persons from history, and that's Sir Winston Churchill. And he said we have to deserve victory. So I'm asking you, are we in a position to deserve victory? We cannot keep the adversaries out of our networks. We have to prepare for attacks launched within. We have to prepare for business and missions on a degraded cyber environment. This is a major shift away from our strategies. And we have to adapt where we're at so we're not building our future on this house of cards. So with that, I'd like to end with this, my email address and my great picture in northern Thailand, because if you don't listen to me, this is what we're left to deal with. We've got to pray about the problem. So we're really in trouble if we don't take cybersecurity seriously, given this shift to digital economy and digital transformation that we're in. So please contact me by email. I'd be happy. I'm located between Singapore and here in Thailand, so I would be happy to take those questions and answers. And I'll be at the Precise booth afterwards to answer the questions that you have. Thank you so much.
ขอเสียงปรบมือให้กับคุณแอนโทนีบาร์กาด้วยนะครับ Please remain on stage as we have a souvenir for you.
Thank you.
At this time I would like to invite up on stage นะครับขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญบนเวทีครับดร.รัฐศาสตร์กรสูตรรองผู้อำนวยการสำนักงานเศรษฐกิจดิจิทัลนะครับให้โอกาสขึ้นมาบนเวทีเพื่อมอบของที่ระลึกให้กับสปีกเกอร์ของเราในวันนี้ด้วยนะครับเรียนเชิญครับ
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you.
เอาละครับขอบพระคุณนะครับดร.รัฐศาสตร์แล้วก็สปีกเกอร์ของเราคุณแอนโทนีบาร์กาด้วยนะครับก็อีกครั้ง